Looks like it's being live streamed, Gemma.
Yep.
Right, we're all live. Okay, well, after morning, still this afternoon, morning, members and colleagues. Thank you for joining us for this Constitution Working Group meeting today. Thank you, colleagues, for sending around the public document pack. The first item, apologies for absence. I don't think, Gemma, we've had any apologies. We've got a full house today. Lovely, good. Item 2 is declaration of interest. Are there any? Can't see anyone indicating, so thank you. Item 3, the minutes of the last meeting on pages 3 to 6. The last meeting was Friday the 4th of October. Are there any points of correction, or can I accept those as an accurate record of the meeting?
Yeah, they can. I propose them as accurate record, Susan. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Paul. And anyone prepared to second, or is that unanimous support?
Always happy to second, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, going back to the agenda.
Susan,
yes.
Sorry, before we start, can I just make a comment, please? Because in view of the recent announcement in the white paper and the cabinet member Angela Rayner's statement and the minister's statement, and obviously some of the notes that we've read, I haven't read everything. I believe that we should actually make a decision to revoke moving into a committee system. It seems to me that the most we can expect is 2 years. So moving from a cabinet system to a committee system with all that involves, when I believe, from what I've read and from conversations I've had, that our officers need to be concentrating on what is going to happen over the next 2 years. For instance, our staff, staff are really important, and how is it going to affect them? We need to look after them, and I would imagine that officers want to spend a bit of time looking after them, working with them, and not creating panic, really, I suppose, from some of them. And also to look at safeguarding our assets, because one of the reasons why I never voted for going into a unitary before, or going into an arrangement with other districts, was the fact that we had Otterpool. And I thought we'd put an awful lot of work into Otterpool. Do we really want to be sharing that with other districts? So I think there is a lot of work to do over the next 2 years, and therefore my proposal, and I would happy to put it as a motion at the next full council, is to actually revoke the decision to move to committee. Sorry, I thought I would just say that first of all, because to be honest, I haven't read all the constitution the draft constitution that we've been sent. Time has been a bit short, and I just feel, is it worth it?
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Right. Should we just open that up, Jenny? You've made a suggestion that we have a conversation about that here. You've also indicated your interest in potentially putting through a motion. We've obviously got David here, which is helpful from a legal point of view.
Yeah, I couldn't see him. I was going to ask his view. Actually, I can't see him on screen.
So maybe we should just give David a moment to get his thoughts together, David, for any advice you want to give to committee, to the working group members. Perhaps we should just, Jenny, see if there's any immediate reaction from other members.
I can offer immediate reactions if you fancy one.
And then Connor.
Yes, of course, Jenny, this has been an enormously difficult week and a bigger shock than I think any of us were expecting. I think we have been muttering the word devolution amongst ourselves for the last few months, thinking that something was going to change, but we didn't know how significant it would be, and it's at the high end of significant for folks on the High District Council. That said, the work which has gone on into doing this, if we are a time-limited council and we have got another 2 years and 3 months left to live, for a number of reasons, I think we should still actually do this. One, we've put a lot of work into this, and officers have put an enormous amount of work into sending around the documents you haven't read yet. It's really important that that work isn't lost. And I think it's going to be important to those officers and those councillors who've engaged in this process. Actually, it gives experience of a new system at exactly a good time for having a range of experience across different systems on your CV. It's also, I think, important that the council does what it thinks is right and lives by the rules that it thinks are the right rules for the last 2 years. For the last 2 years of its life, live your best life and model the best organisation that you could be. And I continue to think it is the best organisation you could be. It also sets some variety of example for whatever the successor authority is likely to be, because obviously there'll be discussions about what structure that successor authority is going to operate under, and there will be a number of us arguing that any successor authority should also be in the committee system, a argument which is strengthened by us actually being in it, as opposed to arguing from the position of being in the government system. And also the work which has been done through this constitutional review, I think significantly strengthens our constitution. It just makes it better. It's a better piece of work. It hangs together in a better way, and I think it will that will give added strength to the council while we go through 2 years, as you say, really important decisions about how to ensure that assets and services are not lost to our district to other areas nearby. And a key part of that is that we're going to need as many councillors together working collegiately on that and feeling that we have shared purpose in that over the course of the next 2 years and 3 months. And I think setting fire to the council at this moment and setting group on group, because we are trying to reverse out a decision which the council has made in significant majority twice, I think is setting up an argument which is really not going to be helpful to us when we're actually going to need people to work together collegiately and collectively in terms of making sure that we actually retain those assets within the authority, or retain those assets to the best advantage of the residents of this authority. So they are the reasons why we'll continue to go ahead. Let's not have a war about something which actually we don't need to have a war about at this moment. Why don't we actually work together? And part of that is that there was an agreement, a deal, done by councillors that we were going to do this thing, and that this was a good way of modelling ourselves and a good way of making decisions collectively. Well, we've got to make decisions collectively. They might be the last ones that we're going to make. So why don't we live our best life and do it that way? That's my idea.
Right, thanks very much, Tim. Appreciate that. I've got Connor and then Paul. And then Jim.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, I mean, just quite briefly, I mean, we will still have a personnel committee to make sure that, all the staff are have, well-being and being looked after, and to ensure that anything that, the council needs to do to ensure its staff are in the best possible place. I imagine a personnel committee will be quite very busy, when we start looking at whatever might come down the road, TUPE to whatever new council. So very important that we still keep that, and we will. We will have a strategy and resources committee that will look after our assets, and as a cross-party group, I think it's much better place to be looking at the sort of the legacy of this council, before it ceases to exist, rather than just a group of 9. So that all the concerns can still be addressed within the new system. I mean, personally, I'd be fighting for whatever unitary comes down the road to be in some form of committee style system. you know, it's much when you're taking on those responsibilities, it works even better, because you would have a committee for health, you'd have a committee for education, you know, they'd have a committee for roads, transport, all of that sort of stuff. You know, there would be more committees. Even if it was a cabinet style system, you would have like overview and scrutiny committees in large unitaries. There's like 4 or 5 or 6 overview and scrutiny committees dealing with health, dealing with this. So the experience councils will get in the next 2 years working under that system, I think, will benefit them if they go on to represent whatever new system comes into place.
Great, thank you, Connor. Paul, and then I'll go to Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Well, I think we're in a position where we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, really, aren't we? And from a resident's point of view, that, you know, people will look at it and say, if we stop now and don't go forward with it, then we've wasted money. And if we do go forward with it, we've wasted money. I support what Tim and Connor have said in terms of, I think it is important. We've set our stall out now, and we've set it out very strongly. And we've got a product, if you like, which we can hang our hat on and go forward with for the future. So I fully support us going ahead with it exactly as it is. Thank you very much, Susan.
Thanks, Paul. And Jim?
Thanks very much, Susan. Yeah, there's political consensus on this. There's no reason to change direction, but if we have only 2 years left, my biggest concern is that we are accused of rearranging the deck chairs on the deck of the Titanic. There would be some, what Paul says is right. We're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. All of the other district councils that are in our cluster, our East Kent cluster, are all cabinet systems. But you know, they're not them. That we are us. We've made the decision, and at the moment, I am in a position that we should pursue it. I've given it a huge amount of thought. My only reservation in saying this, and the only reason that I would change my position, is the impact on the staff. That has got to be at the forefront of obviously after residents, but the impact of this on the staff is that is my overriding concern. So that's kind of where I am at the moment. It's shifting sand under my feet at the moment, so I'm dancing all over the place. So just take those comments in that vein, if you would.
Okay, great, thanks. Jenny, do you want to come back in
Yes,
before
yes, if I may. Well, I obviously disagree with those comments, and I would just take Jim's point on staff. I am, as you all know, I'm particularly keen on the effect that this has on staff and will have on staff. I can see people competing against each other in different areas, and that's not good, and we need to be doing whatever we can to look after our staff. And secondly, I think we keep putting work on officers. How much work can officers take? This is going to be a huge task, a huge project moving forward. And officers will be spending as I understand it, could be spending an awful lot of time looking at all these various issues that would have to be resolved before we move into any kind of unitary or strategic organisation or whatever that might be. And I think we've got a system that's set up, works well. I understand that we spent some money on a committee system. We spend money on other projects that perhaps don't go forward or are delayed for some reason or other. So I don't think the spending of the money on the committee system is something we should be basing our decision on. I just think that it's a sensible way forward. I mean, many other districts, as Jim said, are cabinet. It seems, I understand what Tim's saying in a way about a bit of experience, but why do we need to do that? Our system runs well. Staff like our system. I was talking to somebody the other day, and They said they do like a cabinet member that they can go to, which they won't have under a committee system. But that's a different argument. I just feel from the staff point of view, officer point of view, we should call a halt to this now.
All right, thanks, Jenny. David, so hopefully that's given you a little few minutes just to get some thoughts straight in terms of any response that you want to make at this stage.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I mean, there are means by which you can go back to. I think as with many legal things, it's quite technical and difficult, and I think it's going to be difficult for me to give you any form of comprehensive advice during this call, and I'm also mindful that this is being, broadcast, and it might be helpful to have certain discussions around how the provisions of the legislation operate in a safer space, if you like, for want of a better description. So I don't think I can necessarily give substantive advice now, other than to say there are means by which that could be done. But as I say, there's some technicalities involved, so it would need me to go away and think about it in a little more detail. I don't want to be giving advice off the cuff, and B, for a discussion to take place between everybody about that advice and how that might apply in the circumstances. I know that's probably not as helpful as it might be, but hopefully you understand why I can't give the detailed advice now.
Yeah, no, absolutely, David. Sorry. Unless anyone else wants to comment on that, shall we? Obviously, Jenny, the matter noted. Obviously, the comments have been noted, and absolutely understand, David, your position. Shall we move on back to the agenda then, members? Now, should we do that?
Please.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have got under item 4 a review of outside bodies. Now this we felt needed to come onto the agenda just really to draw a line under the piece of work that Michelle's undertaken for you, because we've just felt that last time we were a little rushed towards the end, so we just wanted to make sure that we've sort of really got that firmed up. And then we also have a proposal under the following item under partnerships, again, which Michelle is going to lead. Michelle, am I right in thinking that you're going to take us through the summary bits, what you just need to make sure members are all comfortable with before we move on to item 5? Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. I'll do that really quickly because I appreciate that there's other things on the agenda for your time and consideration. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry if my signal isn't great, so if it dips out, please let me know, and I'll try and log back in, or let Susan or Ewan pick it up for me, if that's okay. The paper, and I can't share my screen, sorry, but the note that came round basically was just to capture the comments and all in one place so that we're all aware of how that is moving forward into the drafting of the Constitution. So I think the recommendations that we came to were around having a clear criteria, which I've put in the note, for determining outside bodies, that new requests to join or form would be to the leader and chief exec, and then obviously the feedback and frequency of communication is that the outside bodies will report back to council and appointments would be made by council. And I think that was quite a big discussion that we'd had last time, with a number of presumptions listed in my note about how those appointments would be made and that they would be made by the council at each AGM. We also discussed, and I think came to some recommendations around support, insurance and training, that there would be guidance for the legal team, for members appointed to outside bodies where necessary, that we do have indemnity and insurance in place that can be used for those outside bodies, and that handovers between member representatives would be really useful for new members who are appointed to those bodies. We Also agreed that Bosco does fall under the shareholders subcommittee, and that the list on that shareholders subcommittee that's in this paper will no longer be classed as outside bodies, but as shareholder subcommittees moving forward. So we did, at the outset of the review, have a number of strategic objectives, one of which was to look at how we could rationalise the list of outside bodies, which I believe the review has done. So we've come down from 31 to around 16 outside bodies. That obviously isn't set in stone, and I'll come on to that in the partnerships review in the next item. The number isn't set in stone, but I think we're quite happy that the criteria for how those are established and appointed to, I think we're all in agreement with that. We have a number of outside bodies that no longer require member representation or are no longer operating, and those have been listed. And we also have those that are going to remain on the partnership directory, but no longer formally recognised as outside bodies, and the list of those that are now part of the shareholders subcommittee. So I think we met the strategic objectives of the review, and I think at the last meeting, those are the recommendations that we came to for moving forward with the constitution. So before I go on to the next agenda item, shall I just pause to see if there's any comments or questions?
Great, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, thanks for taking us through that so concisely and clearly, and for pre-circulating as part of the pack. I mean, are members happy to accept the summary and the papers that are there before you, or are there any points of clarification that you want to ask Michelle?
I
Paul?
I just wanted to say that
In
I think this
person.
has been a really important review. I thank Michelle for doing that at the time. It's a piece of work that we needed to do anyway. So it is one section which the Constitution and our work with outside bodies needed that review. So it's good that that's been done, and it's good that it's been done in this format. So and I don't have any objections to what was circulated. So I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Tim. And Paul?
Yeah, echo Tim's words. The other thing I would say is in the Constitution there is a piece which is not yet completed, which talks about how do we actually, what process do we go through for actually identifying people in the future, but also how do we then get the feedback from those individuals back into the committee system. So I know that's a separate piece of work that needs to be done prior to May, but yeah, overall, I think it's an excellent piece of work that Michelle's done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Can we just make sure that we link in, because I think what I'm hearing is that there are some suggestions about appointment and also feedback that we just need to make sure then that manages to find the right way into the Constitution as it's going through its final loop.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments from members, or shall we move on to the next item? Yep. Okay, great. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you. So this has come about from the review of outside bodies, and I think it was something that we spoke about quite early on in the review of outside bodies, is that we also have a partnership directory and a partnership policy, and they're great pieces of work and they're reviewed regularly, and I'm not proposing that we completely overhaul those pieces of work, but I think in having reviewed the outside bodies and also with the move to a committee system, the partnership policy does still make reference to members sitting on partnerships within their cabinet roles. So we may need to review that going forward with the committee system. Also, just making that clear definition. So we have a clear set of criteria for the outside bodies. And I think it would be really good to align that with the partnership policy so that we all understand why we work in partnership, which I'm sure we will do, but why certain partnerships exist, how they feed back into the council, and how members who are sitting on those partnerships are equally supported moving forward. So the strategic objectives I'm proposing are to review the framework within which partnerships sit, update the policy and the partnership register to link to the new corporate plan once that's agreed, and the outside bodies review, to just clarify the role of members with regards to the new committee structure, improve information exchange and ensure appropriate support. So I have proposed a timing of the review, and I think, having chatted through with Susan, it would be good if this could be finished by May when the committee structure comes into play. So I have put some stages there about analysis, bringing the findings back to this group, having the recommendations exactly the same way as we have with the outside bodies review, and reporting back with a final report to yourselves as Constitution Working Group in April. This has also opened up some questions around those partnerships that are on the directory, and one in particular Councillor Polly Blakemore has asked me to raise, which is the White Cliffs Community Rail Partnership. So I think we do need to just do some comparisons around the criteria for partnership working and for outside bodies working. So that will be part of this review, and I will stop there in case there are any questions or comments.
Great, thank you very much, Michelle. I think that clarity between what is a partnership and what's an outside body is really, really important. So that getting that criteria right will be something I think next time we just need to come back to the group on, and also the feedback mechanisms, but importantly, how any appointments are made, because as you said, at the moment that it's assumed that the cabinet members, as part of their executive roles, can pick and choose and do what, you know, go to which partnerships I guess they're invited to. It's quite relaxed as an approach at the moment, and I think with committee we need to just think through a little bit more about that and come back. So those are my initial reactions, but thank you very much for taking us into it. Are there any comments or queries from members at this stage? Nope. I think no, Tim was coming off, but I didn't see a hand, but he was coming off his mic. But I would just say thank you for looking at the timescales about getting this all done and dusted before we move to the AGM in May. But Tim, come on in.
I was just going to say where you said flexible, you could also be challengeable, I think, in terms of the way that those appointments are currently made. So it's good that we will actually have process with clarity that makes it unchallengeable. So I think that's again a strong piece of work.
Any other comments? Otherwise, Michelle, I think I'm hearing that is, you know, thank you very much for thinking about this. Thank you very much for proposing it. Thank you very much for agreeing the timetable, which I know in view of everything else you've got going on with the corporate plan, action plan and everything is you know, a lot, but a really important piece of the jigsaw. So any other closing comments, Michelle, from you?
No, thank you. I'll do the outline and do the strategic objectives and bring those back to hopefully in the new year.
Okay, brilliant, great. Thank you very much, Michelle. You did click out for a minute or two there, but I think we got the essence.
Sorry, I thought I had. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Are you leaving us now, Michelle?
I think I will, because my connection is dropping in and out. So rather than hold anyone up, I'll duck out. But thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a good Christmas, because I won't probably see anyone before then.
Likewise. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So now we go on to item 6, members, on the agenda, which is titled Varmints and Financial Thresholds. And this is really just as, again, it's a recap. It was at the end of the last meeting, so there's nothing new in here. She says, looking at Gemma, I'm sure that's my recollection. No, is that right? There's nothing new in here. It's just I wanted to make sure I was on solid ground before we get into the final discussions with A&G about the Constitution. So you will see in your pack exactly verbatim, I think, the slides that we had talked you through last time. So the first item talks about just where we're at, what's ongoing in various different things. We're going to come on to that next item with David in a moment. The second slide in your pack talks about the thresholds that we spoke. There was no difference to the figures that we spoke about. Clearly, the third bullet point is missing a K for thousands, but that was what we discussed last time, and there was a very brief discussion around could different areas have different varmints or thresholds, and my very strong advice would to you was no, because it'll get so confusing, and when the directors cover for each other when we're on leave or we need to have a very simple set of rules that we work to make sure that we act appropriately. So this is whether it's capital or revenue. There's no difference by type of money, and there's no difference by nature of spend in terms of council services. So I just really wanted to underline that. And there's another section that will come on to under the latter item, which is about just the part of the constitution relating to budget setting. So that's all I was going to say by way of introducing this item. But can I just check with Ewan and Gemma? There's nothing else that I've missed off in terms of introducing this bit, is there?
No, don't think so, Susan. No, that's good.
Right. Great. Thank you very much, both of you. So members, can I take it that you're agreeing to the thresholds as outlined? Brilliant. I've got some thumbs up. Fabulous. That's great. Thank you so much. So that takes us then on to item 7.
Susan, sorry to interject. So those environments and financial thresholds have been discussed and agreed previously with the group, but in the discussions that I've had with chief officers, there were concerns that perhaps those thresholds might be too low in certain respects. And I think the main concern expressed, certainly in some service areas, was around presently the environments are cumulative. So, you know, some services might find it necessary, simply by the nature of what they do, that they will have to shift money about among budgets heads quite regularly. But if these thresholds are cumulative, they'll soon eat up that threshold, and then they're going to have to be going back to members potentially, or committee, on a regular basis, because they've already, through increments of whatever environments it might be, come up to that threshold. So after that threshold is met, if there's a cumulative provision there, then any environment, no matter how much, would then have to go to committee, which is going to be unworkable, I suspect, in relation to some service areas. And certainly there were concerns raised with me when I discussed it with chief officers. So the reason behind putting this before members again was to say, are these thresholds too low? But also this point around the cumulative requirement. So is that something that members want to see, that it is a cumulative figure, or
well,
whether...
Can I ask a different question, David? Can I ask, what is your advice?
My advice is, I think they are relatively low, and I think, without even looking at the cumulative, certainly definitely too low if you retain that cumulative provision. I think there's some merit in having a cumulative provision, but I think if you do have a cumulative provision, then you will definitely need to raise those thresholds. And
what would a cumulative provision look like? Because the reason why I'm asking you is that we have been around the houses on this, and so, you know, we were running out of time now, so I need some specifics to put in front of members for them to agree or disagree with. So what's your proposal?
So I would probably propose then that there are 2 elements to it. One is looking at environment on its own without looking at the cumulative side of things. So saying environment of these levels at these thresholds can be taken by X, Y, and Z, and then having sort of an annual cumulative limit to say, once you hit that limit, then anything after that has to go to committee, rather than those figures that are presented there being the cumulative limits. If that makes sense.
So just so I'm clear, the on the slide in front of members in this pack that we discussed last time, the 4 bullet points, you're suggesting that those are the thresholds, environment thresholds, but then there's an additional bullet point, which is which wording covers a cumulative facility.
Yes, because your current constitution works on a cumulative basis, the environment thresholds. And that's where the officers were saying to me, actually, this is sometimes causing problems.
So just so we're really clear, the suggestion is that these 4 bullet points are for the individual environments, but there'd be another bullet point which talks about the cumulative threshold figure in any one financial year. Have I understood that correctly?
That's one option. The other is not to have the cumulative limit at all, but to simply have these thresholds for each individual environment.
Okay, can I just ask then members how they feel? Do they want a cumulative, or do they want to keep it of a threshold by each environment amount? Any strong views either way? Jim?
I think that yeah, I understand the reason for both, but I think just having the cumulative is the one that causes the problem. The principal problem, should we say? So I you know, I mean, who can tell the future, etc., etc. I think the thresholds are thresholds, fair enough. I think if we remove the cumulative, we will remove part of the problem, or the principal part of the problem.
So your suggestion, Jim, is we do not consider environments on a cumulative basis. They're all individually done against these 4 bullet points. Is that
Yeah, that would, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any disagreements to that, or can we accept that as a working group you're happy for us to proceed on that basis? Jenny, you're on mute.
No, sorry, I just raised my hand as you asked if we were in agreement. I've certainly, that was my view.
Okay. Anyone disagreeing with Jenny and Jim?
No, I'm agreeing with both Jenny and
Great.
Jim.
Okay, David, does that give us enough then to finalise this section?
Yes, thank you, Susan.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for that. Is there anything else on this item at all before we go on to item 7? No? Brilliant. Thank you very much, all of you. Okay, so item 7 actually is a constitution update. Could I ask for permission to swap an item round, just while we're in the groove of more detail on funding? And sorry, I should have asked for this to be swapped around when I looked at the agenda. I wanted just to talk about external funding. One of the issues at the moment we tend to get ourselves up in knots around is having to seek members' agreement to apply for external funding over what is a relatively low threshold. We tend to get asked to either bid for work, for example, out of hours contracts, or there's a very short window of a bidding round, which doesn't necessarily fall into our paper management meeting rhythm. So the suggestion was that we, with the various safeguards in terms of going through CLT, so I'm fully cited on it, and the section 151 is fully cited on it, and it doesn't have any immediate impact on our budget framework. But the proposal is in the future that with CLT's approval, an application can be made, but before accepting the external monies, we will of course have gone through the various proper processes in terms of the various committee. So I think that was in essence what I just wanted to explore with you all. I'm sorry there wasn't any formal wording that I've prepared. I just really wanted to see about your essence, because that was one of the more technical bits that we tend to it's a bit clunky for us. So in principle, if you're supportive, what I would suggest is that I bring back, or we can circulate via email for you, some proposed wording. And maybe that's a way of us trying to sort of, just keep moving with this process before we get to ANG in January. Tim, I think you were first and then Jim.
Absolutely happy with that, Susan. I think that the principle that councillors agree to accept money, but you can decide whether it's worth rolling the dice to go and look for it. I think that is A, logical, and B, improves our current position and saves staff time over the course of the next period using the constitutional review in a way that Jenny would very much favour. So you see the advantages of the constitutional review here. So yeah, it's a good thing to do. Please do.
Thank you, Tim. Jim, and then I'll go to Paul.
Yeah, just to echo what Tim has said, I don't think there's I can only imagine that if any senior officer came to me saying, should we apply for this funding, I would instantly say yes. I can't think of a circumstance where I would say no, don't apply for funding that will benefit our residents. It's just, so yeah, as quickly as possible. This is a minor point.
Great, thank you. And Paul?
I support. So again, as you quite rightly say, you've got the safeguard there of the leadership team and the Section 151 officer, and so again, I think just in terms of managing that, that's not something that's going to happen lightly, is it? So no, I think that's it's a good solution. So thank you, Susan.
Great, lovely, thank you. We will get some form of words out, and we'll suggest we get that round email to you. So thank you very much for your support. So the final item, which is item 7, is a constitution update, and my thanks to David for circulating his all the parts and the last draft. So David, over to you.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, apologies everybody that I didn't get it to you sooner. So yeah, you now have the complete suite, if you like, of draft working documents with lots of comments, lots of amendments, as you'll have seen. Apologies if you've not had time to go through all of it. So what I was proposing is just to sort of, if there's any feedback at this stage or any particular items, I'm sure Councillor Prater might have some input. I can tell from, yes, the smile on his face. But the other thing that I think, because it was part of the slides we've just looked at, following on from the environment. So if it's okay to deal with the budget and policy development framework, procedure framework, so that's set out in part 4. It's part 4E of part 4. Now, what I put in there was a procedure that was indicative, and therefore wasn't necessarily me saying this is what you should have in place. I think it's a good procedure. I think it will work, but obviously it needs to reflect how you as a council want to work. So it's, often not one size fits all in these respects, but loosely speaking, that's what you would expect it to look like. So I just wondered whether there have been a few comments that have come through. I got some comments through yesterday from the 151 officer, which I'm looking at. But does anybody have any views about that development process of the budget? So there's two strands. One is development and approval of the budget. One is in relation to the development and approval of plans and strategies that fall within the policy framework. So those are plans and strategies which have to be approved by full council. So anybody have any comments on that element of the constitution?
Anyone wants to comment on that? Anyone managed to have a look at part 4E? Tim?
Let's look at part 4E. The budget process makes sense. I mean, effectively at the moment, our constitution has no backstop for what happens if council rejects the budget. Essentially, we get to the last day of February and we panic. So the fact that there is a process in there for rescuing that situation and putting it back in place seems to make sense. I got a bit confused originally when it said in 2.5.5 a final meeting of the council before the 11th of March. I think it means final meeting of the council on the budget process. It's the budget process's final meeting of the council. As far as I could see, there's no block on having another meeting of the council to do other stuff that's not budget related later in March, but that wasn't quite how it read, but I'll come, deal with that. And equally, in terms of the policy process, all it's doing is it's putting in place, as far as I can see, a process whereby if it's considered by council and council goes, yeah, not so much, change that, then there's a process for it to come back to a relatively soon meeting, having been back through a committee and come back to that meeting, as opposed to our current position where effectively it would fall. It would just fall and we'd be in the 6-month moment. So I think the process made sense. I wasn't sure about the 11th of March date. I think if we got as far as the 11th of March to set the budget, I think that the finance team would be nervous about doing the appropriate work by the time that the bills went out. But I'm sure that the Section 151 is giving advice on. They got the process. I was just a little bit worried about the wording of final budget, and I was a little bit nervous about the 11th of March deadline.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Prater. So I'll take the latter point first. The 11th of March is actually a date that's set out in legislation. So that's where that comes from. As you say, most councils will hopefully have had it resolved a good while before that, because there's lots of work that flows on from that. But that is a backstop date, and as I say, it's just to reflect what's in the legislation. So we could build in something to say the council will aim to have it done by such and such a date, but the final backstop date is. Whether you want that in or not, I don't think it's necessary. I think as is, but I understand what you're saying. But as I say, it simply reflects the legislation. The other point, the wording, yes, absolutely happy to tweak that so it's a little more obvious or less confusing. So I'll go away and do that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any other comments about this part? I know Lydia has given you some comments about do we really need an initial full council meeting? I think this is terminology and number of steps and things like that. But
yeah, we can talk about that offline. Happy to do that. But I suppose just very briefly on that point, it's supposed to show a process. So normally you would, for example, you take a budget to full council so in the executive system, you would take the budget to full council. It's proposed. If it's not agreed, it then goes back to the executive. They have a number of days to reconsider, and then it goes back to full council. So it's that process, but in a committee system, and that's how we quite frequently see it playing out. Is how that's reflected in there and how it works quite well. And as Councillor Prater has said, it gives that means by which to address where there are disagreements about aspects and for further reconsideration and getting to the point where you need to be, where you're saying, yes, we're all agreed, off we go and out the bills go, etc. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, useful. Right.
I think the key from our own understanding here is that when we say it's the initial council meeting, 99% of the time we really hope that that's the only one. It's the council meeting which passes the budget. It just gives you the constitutional emergency flag, as opposed to shutting everything down on 1st of March. You've got a way forward with passing a budget if everything goes to hell at what we would call the budget meeting.
no, yes.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So David, where do you want to go next?
Well, it was simply, I suppose, if anybody wanted to raise anything about the drafts that have gone round, whether there's anything that, any points that people would like to make within reason. So over to the group, really. Councillor Prater.
Thank you. I will do my 25 separate bullet points at speed. Some of them are just consistency. A couple of them are more on principle. So just going through the parts in sections. I have no issues with part 1. I'd be delighted to know. It's just the other things. On part 2, 12.3.5, where we discussed the monitoring officer conducting investigations, etc. I don't think it's clear in there that should also cover complaints received regarding town and parish councils and councillors. And I think it would be useful to be explicit in there that they can do those investigations there as well. And again, in section 12.2, we just got a couple of references where we've changed terms. So 12.4.1 refers to chief finance officer, and you played that game everywhere else in the document and made that, I think, the section 151 officer or the director of corporate services, but we retain the chief finance officer there, which I think is an issue. And in section 14 in part 2, there are regular references to the assistant director, governance, law and regulatory services. We don't need those no more. I don't know what we replace it with, but it ain't that. That's my feedback on part 2. I don't know if anyone else has stuff, if it's useful to do it part by part, or whether it's useful that I just keep running through. I can't see anyone else waving, so I'm going to keep going.
I think you just keep running through. Sorry, I was on mute. Keep running through, Tim, please.
Part 3, there was some question. 2.1.3, we've got another reference to chief finance bracket section 151 officer. Whatever horse we're riding, let's ride it. 2.1.5 there. 2.1.5.1, which is essentially about the size of the shareholders committee. There's a no number in there. I think that should be the same size as so I think it's a 6, and therefore a quorum of 3, unless other people have an objection to that. That's where I thought that would best go. I have written a oblique note which says 2.2.24. I think I am recommending again that should be the number which is inserted there. I can't see what 2.4. It was again another question whether the number of the committee. 2.2.2. 3.2.4. No, I've lost myself. Yeah, sorry, it's the Community and Environments Committee. So again, we've put the quorum is 3 in there, and it would make it the same as strategy and policy. I would have think the quorum for that one should be 4. 3.1.3.2a. So application, that's on call-in of planning applications. And it currently says applications that have been called into the committee at the request of any district councillor. I think currently it's any any application in the ward of any district councillor, as opposed to giving me the ability to call in any application anywhere in the district. And I think Llewellyn would very, very much like it to remain that only a ward councillor can call in an application in their ward, as opposed to just go random across the piece. So I'd suggest that we're adding in their ward or something at that stage. 4.1.1, so the size of the Audit and Governance Committee. I saw your note, Susan, on for guidance saying 8, so I think that is the right size for that, and I think the quorum of 3 for that would make sense. Again, I breathe. We'll see if other people have got hands in the air for this section. No, still going. Part 4, 1.1.2f. I think needs to, because the council is now going to elect the leader and deputy leader, and the words the deputy leader is not referred to as being elected anywhere. That probably should happen. And I have a question in terms of technicality of how that works in this year. It works at our AGM in May, because that's not the 4-yearly. If you're going to do it on a 4-yearly cycle, that's not the 4-yearly meeting. Do we just say that there will be elections in May? There'll be nomination elections in May. Do we say that the people who are currently doing the job stand, which is probably going to raise an eyebrow or two? Just what is our process for May in terms of transitioning this one? 1.2.1 doesn't reference subcommittees, and probably should. 1.3.1 and 1.3.2. That's quite fun. So that's referring to the council appointing the chair of the committees, but then 1.3.2 immediately gives the committees the ability to remove the chair or deputy chair. So as far as I could see, you could spin that for as long as you wanted. If the committee did not agree with if a committee didn't agree with the council keep appointing the chair, and the committee keep no confidence in them, and you end up with you end up in a death loop, which means that you never actually hold a meeting because you get rid of the chair at the beginning of each meeting, and the next council meeting has to reappoint. I'm not confident that's what was intended there. Significant point of principle on this one, on extraordinary meetings, 3.1.1e, any 5 members of the council, if they signed a requisition, presented to the chair of the council, and the chair is refused to call a meeting or has not called a meeting within 7 days of the presentation. But effectively, 5 members of the council signing a piece of paper put Susan in the position whereby she will be requested to call a council meeting, an extraordinary council meeting. 5 seemed like quite a low number to me. Discuss.
Sorry, Councillor Prater, do you want me to come in on that there? I think it might be helpful. The figure of 5 comes from legislation. It's Schedule 12 of the Local Government Act 72. But you could put something else in which requires a higher threshold, but then there is a potential conflict between, it could be argued that that's unreasonable because it doesn't reflect the legislation properly, that there's a higher threshold. So that's where the 5 comes from.
Okay, and I understand that it's only effectively a request to the to the head of paid service, and the head of paid service could ignore it, but it does put them in the hole at their position. I'm surprised 5 is the number. I can't recall seeing that elsewhere. I know that different legislation covers town and parishes, but I haven't seen 5 councillors be able to call extraordinary meetings on that basis under their legislative framework. But okay. The terms of where there was some discussion about the delivery of summons, etc., and Susan rightly said, can we remove posting them? I would have thought that we could also remove references to leaving it at their usual place of reference. Residents. From that same clause. Basically, we're going to send it to them by email. That's what we're going to do. That's what we have been doing for years. Let's not pretend that we're going to drop a copy onto their doorstep. And similarly, under 8.3 in that section, I think we can, instead of electronic mail, I think we know each other well enough that we could call it email by now. The 12.1, you note that you've removed opposition business per se, but that's I've got no problem with that because they've got the ability to call a motion. They put a motion in normal terms. However, the question that I've got around that is that you've got the ability to publish amendments in advance as well, and I get that, but the deadline is the same. So the motion, so if somebody submits a motion, the only people who can know what's in that motion and therefore submit any substantive amendment to it that made any sense before the deadline for publishing, it, are the people who wrote the motion. So having the ability to put amendments to a motion onto the summons doesn't work on the same. It doesn't work if you've got the same deadline for publishing the motion and publishing the amendment, because I can't know what I'm amending until it's been published, and by the time it's been published, it's too late for me to put it on the summons. So I think either we just remove the references to the amendments being published in advance at that stage, or we have to give it a different date. For simplicity, we're probably just putting amendments on there, I would have thought. 20.1, standing to speak. Major bugbear, little flag. I know it's in the current constitution. I genuinely don't think that we should be forcing councillors to speak because A, you have microphones which are at desk level, and until we give people roving mics so we can walk around so we can stand up and walk around the authority and not hunch over a microphone, I think it is the better thing to do. It's also a disability issue because we are outing people with hidden disabilities at this stage who struggle to stand by allowing them, if you've got a disability, to remain seated to speak. Let's just remove the requirement. When a councillor speaks at full council, they must address the meeting through the chair. They can choose to stand or sit, whichever they prefer. Just remove a fight from the world that we don't need, and last made sense in 1963. 16, I've made a reference here to 16. We have not, I think this is a comment that you've made. We have not included a section on the removal of a chair. This is reserved to full council and have dealt with it elsewhere. I don't think it is referred to full council because I said in 1.3.2, the removal of a committee chair was in the purview of the committee. So it's referenced specifically in 1.3.2. So I think it should go. 2.4. So I'm into part 4C here. Yeah, actually, it is a principal point as well. Sorry. which is that when you are calling things, so 4C, I think this is recall or is it rescission?
It's rescission.
It's rescission. So you set the number of councillors, and it needs to be across 2 committees, and it needs to be in different groups, and I have no problem with that. But then you have to, but then it includes that that rescission has to be signed by the relevant committee chair or vice chair. Well, that does give 2 people the ability to stop anything being rescised. And if you're in the strategy and policy committee, for instance, that would mean that the leader and the deputy leader could stop any item being considered for rescission on their own, which I don't think is something that we should have. I'm happy for the number to be higher, and for for it to be difficult, but I don't think that the relevant committee chair or vice chair should effectively have a block on consideration of rescission. Part 4E we've already discussed. In part 5 you have a 4.1C in terms of what you can do to people who are found, what the monitoring officer can do to people. 4.1C has the ability to recommend to the leader of the district council that the subject member be removed from cabinet or removed from particular portfolio responsibilities. That clearly needs tidying. That's the end of 25 points.
Thank you. Sorry, Susan.
The huge amount of work that has gone into that, and the huge number of and the comments of officers and staff were hugely valuable in going through that. From Susan, Andrina, so Andrew Rush's hand in there a number of times. I saw a number of other hands. So thank you, to everybody who has been through that, the enormous piece of work that you've done for it. I think we have created a much better and stronger document with all of that feedback. And thank you, David, for helping draw those together, because in some instances I could see the comments were a bit face off. So thank you for picking a side and giving us something that works on. I think those do.
Thanks very much, Tim. David, is there anything just by way of response to all of those 25 or however many points were before I just ask if there's any other comments from any other members?
I can email that list over to David as well. If that's
that'd be really helpful, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, other than to say thank you for taking the time to look through that, Councillor Prater, and for your feedback. And you've already answered my next question, which was, can you send the list through to me, please? So thank you. Okay.
All right. Are there any other comments from members? Of course, you have got opportunity. You can feed those in remotely. David, what date are we working to in terms of? I have promised that we would circulate the most up-to-date draft on the 6th of January. Because I've got a lot of members asking me for sight of it actually this side of Christmas. But I've said that in view of the working group today, we would be able to get something out on the 6th. So perhaps we'll just leave it like that, oh, Connor, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Do you want to come in, Connor?
Thanks. Yeah, I have made a few points, but as I was doing it at midnight, I've got lots of things with like 2.2.4 or whatever, but I haven't put the part next. So I have to go through the individual parts and put parts. So otherwise, I'm never gonna find them now. But I'll send them through in the next day or so.
Actually, that's a really good reminder, Connor, because I was picking up, David, from colleagues as well, that the whole numbering system of our constitution seems to be hugely complicated. And I just wondered whether there is whether it has to be like that, whether it's just ours, or whether it could just be made more straightforward. Because I have looked at quite a few constitutions over the last few months, and none of them seem to be quite as complicated as ours in terms of parts and numbering. But any view?
No, certainly I can look at that. I mean, I suppose what I would say in response is, there needs to be clarity. Well, this kind of I know you're saying that perhaps doesn't lend itself to clarity, but equally, you know, each part needs, or each element needs to have its own specific reference. So sometimes you can get quite a lot of cascading in terms of, you know, the numbering and etc., which can then result in a great long number prefixed by part whatever. But I'll certainly have a look at that and see if I can make that a little easier to digest.
Okay, well, we'll leave you to ponder that. But if members, anything else, thank you very much for your input today. Anything by email be great, and we will try and get a version round on the 6th to support A&G on the 20th. Okay, I will also say that I think we've got a very detailed page turn, haven't we, scheduled in the diary. With CLT colleagues, is that right?
Yeah, we've got one with CLT, and we're going to do a final page turn with chief officers as well. So Andrew et al., who have already contributed, but just a final check that first week back. Okay, because it is important that we all own it. We all own the Constitution. We all understand what's in there, rather than just one or two of us having to, you know, act as a gatekeeper or the interpreter. So, okay. Are there any other comments then on the Constitution? Otherwise, I think we might have done all the agenda, which is interesting with 20 minutes to go. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, we're nothing if not prompt today. Right.
I'll give you another 20 minutes if you like.
No, I've got other things I'd like to do for you. So, okay. Well, thank you very much, members. Thank you for colleagues. And those of you coming to the council meeting, I will see you later on today. Many thanks.
Yeah. See you this evening.
Thanks,
Yeah, bye now.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.